In the grand imagination of medieval splendor, towering castles with gleaming banners and lavish feasts often take center stage. What rarely crosses the mind, however, is the royal bathroom. And yet, these unsung chambers of medieval necessity offer a bizarre, grimy, and frankly hilarious insight into how royalty did their business. Welcome to the world of royal toilets, the noble privilege of doom where one misstep could literally send you falling into the moat. Castles may have looked majestic from a distance, but when it came to plumbing, things were far less glamorous. The medieval world had no flushing toilets, no scented candles, and certainly no ceramic thrones for kings, queens, and nobles. The toilet was often a stone seat perched precariously over an open chute, sometimes projecting out from the side of the castle wall. Below this chute, foul mix of waste, rainwater, and whatever else happened to be stewing in the castle's cesspit or moat. These contraptions were called garderobes, a word that now means wardrobe, oddly enough, but once referred to a medieval toilet. Imagine a narrow stone chamber tucked into the thick outer wall of a castle, with a hole in the floor or seat that led directly to the outside. Some of these garderobes had vertical shafts that dumped waste into a pit, while others extended out over the moat, letting gravity handle the disposal. It might seem ingenious waste out of sight and out of mind, but this convenience came with unexpected danger. Falling into the moat was not some distant, unlikely horror. It happened. These garderobes were not only unguarded and exposed to the elements, they were slippery, cold, and dark. There was no cozy bathroom lighting, no ventilation, and certainly no concern for ergonomic design. Royalty might have sat on embroidered cushions, but beneath their thrones was a terrifying drop. If someone lost their balance, or the old wooden seat cracked, the result could be immediate and humiliating, a tumble into the mire below. The moat, of course, was not a pristine ring of sparkling water. Often it was a grim brew of rain, runoff, fish guts, discarded food, and human waste. Some moats were dry, but many served as receptacles for whatever was tossed out of the castle, including everything flushed from the garderobes above. Falling in meant not just embarrassment, but genuine danger. Drowning was a risk, especially if the fall knocked someone unconscious. Infection was almost guaranteed. And for an unlucky few, this royal plummet turned out to be fatal. Some castles tried to manage this with a system of cesspits or cesspools located strategically beneath garderobes. Servants, known as gong farmers, were tasked with cleaning these out. It was a thankless and vile job, involving shoveling out sludge in the dead of night and hauling it away in carts. They were paid well, but they were considered unclean, shunned by society, and often lived on the outskirts of towns. Without regular maintenance, these cesspits could overflow, backing up into the garderobes or flooding nearby rooms with a reeking tide. Garderobes were also military weak spots. Attackers sometimes used them as entry points. If they were low enough or poorly protected, an enemy soldier could crawl up the shaft and into the castle. Guards knew this, and some garderobes were built over sheer cliffs or heavily fortified walls. Still, stories persist of soldiers slipping through these stinking passageways, braving the waste to launch a surprise attack from inside the very bowels of the fortress. Then there were the diseases. In an age when germ theory didn't exist, people had little understanding of the risks that human waste posed. Moats filled with excrement were breeding grounds for dysentery, typhoid, and other diseases. During sieges, when waste accumulated and water supplies became contaminated, sickness could sweep through a castle faster than any invading army. Even the nobility were not safe. Some royals died from infections they didn't understand, caused by the very systems they believed were keeping their lives clean and separate from the filth. But perhaps the most ironic twist was how these unsightly toilets were considered symbols of sophistication. To have a private garderobe meant you were wealthy. Many nobles had them built into their bedrooms, sometimes even multiple garderobes per chamber. Castles like Dover, Windsor, and Rochester boasted rows of garderobes lined up neatly on the outer walls, protruding like stone balconies with deadly drops beneath them, while peasants relieved themselves in bushes, pits, or communal outhouses. The aristocracy had gravity and masonry on their side until they didn't. There are legends of nobles meeting undignified ends through these very contraptions. Some stories tell of drunken lords stumbling into their garderobes at night, missing the hole entirely and plunging to their deaths. Others speak of wooden beams giving way after years of rot, betraying their occupants in the most grotesque fashion. In one widely repeated tale, a bishop in the 12th century fell to his death through his own toilet seat when the floor collapsed. His enemies took this as divine judgment, but it was likely just poor architecture and worse luck. Even royalty sometimes took precautions. Some garderobes were placed inside small towers, with multiple chutes leading down to a pit below. Designed to carry away waste with the help of rainwater or small streams redirected for the purpose, the chutes were angled to prevent splashback, and in some cases, herbs were placed near the seat to mask the smell. Still, no amount of rosemary or lavender could hide the reality of what lay below. When you picture a grand medieval feast, it's easy to get lost in the opulence. The roasted boar, the flowing wine, the music and laughter echoing through stone halls. But just outside those chambers, down a dark corridor and through a heavy wooden door, the royal toilet awaited, and it was not glamorous. It was a reminder that no matter how powerful you were, your basic bodily functions still put you in danger. Not just metaphorical danger, either literal danger, in the form of a long fall and a hard, wet landing. It's a strange thing to consider that the same king who led armies and governed vast territories might have started his morning carefully balancing over a cold stone seat, praying not to slip. Queens in layers of silk and brocade lifted their skirts in drafty towers, teetering over the abyss with only faith in the stone beneath them. Courtiers and lords who wore velvet and gold by day faced the same crude architecture when nature called. Modern plumbing has its flaws, but few would argue that the danger of falling into your own toilet is a daily threat. In medieval castles, however, that threat was all too real. The royal garderobe may have symbolized privilege and refinement, but it was built on top of a literal pit of doom. And if you weren't careful, one misstep could turn the throne room into a tomb. In the end, the royal toilet tells us a lot about the Middle Ages. It shows the gap between rich and poor, the limitations of medieval engineering, and the unexpected ways that nature could humble even the mightiest rulers. These garderobes of doom were symbols of status, but also emblems of human frailty. They remind us that, for all the gold, titles, and castles, everyone sat on the same kind of seat-hand. Everyone, from kings to commoners, hoped not to fall in. And when we look back at medieval history, it is perhaps worth remembering that sometimes the most revealing stories come not from the battlefield or the throne room, but from the bathroom. The next time you flush and walk away without a second thought, spare a moment for the medieval noble, gripping the stone edge of a drafty tower, peering into the darkness below, and praying that today would not be the day they fell into the moat. Thanks for joining us on this strange and slightly stinky journey through the royal toilets of medieval castles. It's easy to get caught up in the glamour of kings and queens, but stories like these remind us that even the most powerful had to face some pretty grim realities. Who knew that a simple bathroom break could come with the risk of plummeting into a moat full of filth? History isn't just about grand battles and royal feasts. Sometimes it's about what was hiding just down the hall behind a wooden door. These royal garderobes might have been symbols of wealth, but they were also ticking time bombs of discomfort and danger. And honestly, that makes medieval life feel a lot more human. If you enjoyed this quirky dive into castle life, make sure to like, subscribe, share it with someone who thinks medieval times were all elegance and chivalry. We've got plenty more odd and unexpected history coming your way, so stick around for more stories that pull back the curtain on the past. Till next time, be glad your bathroom doesn't overlook a moat. Out. And remember, in the Middle Ages, even going to the toilet was a risky royal adventure.